Caligula, or Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, was born at Antium, an ancient coastal town south of Rome, or modern-day Anzio, on the 31st of August 12 AD during the twilight years of the reign of Emperor Augustus. Caligula was named after Gaius Julius Caesar, the legendary general, politician, and dictator who reigned from 46 to 44 BC, but acquired the nickname Little Boots in childhood, a nickname he grew to despise. Ruling as Rome's emperor from 37 AD until his assassination in 41 AD, Caligula's was a relatively short reign, yet infamous for its cruelty, madness, self-indulgence, and sexual perversions, with far-reaching consequences. So, let's take a look. Welcome to the Roman Empire. Little Boots. Gaius suffered a calamitous youth, most of which was spent navigating the tumultuous politics, scandals, and tyrannical characteristics of the dawn of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, a recognized period of time covering the beginning of the reign of Augustus in 31 BC to the death of Nero in 68 AD. His earliest years were spent separated from his prominent parents. His father, Germanicus Julius Caesar, was a respected Roman general who commanded a full 1/3 of the entire army at the height of his power. The grandson of Mark Antony, another infamous general and politician, Germanicus led numerous successful and bloody campaigns in Germania and Gaul. Gaius's mother, Agrippina the Elder, was the granddaughter of Gaius Octavius Augustus, the founder of the Roman Empire and its first emperor, and the stepdaughter of the reigning emperor Tiberius Julius Caesar Augustus, and as such was extremely well versed in political intrigue. Shortly after Gaius's birth, Germanicus returned to Germania on another campaign against one of the most stubborn enemies of Rome, and Agrippina left her son in Rome to join her husband in the field. Around the age of 2, he joined his parents in Germany and lived the next few years as something of a mascot to the army on campaign. It's easy to imagine that this period would have been tense for young Gaius, with the constant upheaval and travelling as part of an army on campaign, and despite the many successes of his father, living in the dangerous environment that surrounded them. It was during this period that he earned his unique nickname. Agrippina favoured dressing Gaius in a small soldier's uniform complete with miniature boots, and this was an attire he was often seen in by the ever-present soldiers of his father's army. As such, they affectionately nicknamed him Little Boots, or Caligula in Latin. Aged only 7 in 19 AD, Caligula joined his parents in Syria whilst Germanicus inspected the eastern provinces. And it is here that his father died under highly mysterious circumstances. The symptoms of his illness and the swiftness of his subsequent death fueled speculation of Germanicus having been poisoned. Germanicus was a popular general amongst the army, and many within the imperial court viewed him as a potential rival to the existing emperor Tiberius. Whilst dying, the general lay the blame for his illness on Gnaeus Calpurnius Piso, the governor of Syria installed by Tiberius, with whom he had quarrelled incessantly. Germanicus claimed that Piso's wife Plancina had poisoned him, perhaps even on the word of the emperor. Yet, Piso's timely suicide ahead of his prosecution before the Senate meant that the question of assassination was never answered. Roman biographer C. Suetonius Tranquillus wrote that the general suffered a, quote, long drawn-out disease with bluish spots that covered the entire body and foaming at the mouth, which certainly sounds like symptoms of poisoning. However, this was never proven, and others contest he could have merely contracted a fatal illness in the unfamiliar Egyptian or Syrian climate. A death or two in the family. In the years following Germanicus' death, Agrippina was certainly not shy in expressing her belief that Tiberius had played a role in her husband's death, and the political ambitions for both herself and her 9 children. Naturally, this drew the attention of the emperor, who considered her status and illustrious heritage, as well as the potential for succession of her sons, as a threat to his own power and security. As a consequence of this and the brutal ambition of Tiberius' power-hungry Praetorian prefect Lucius Aelius Sejanus, Agrippina and her eldest son Nero were exiled. her to the island of Pandateria and him to the Italian island of Pontia. Agrippina's second son, Drusus, was also imprisoned and executed in Rome, as was Nero on Pontia, and just 4 years later, Agrippina heartbreakingly starved herself to death in 33 AD. Caligula was sent to live with his great-grandmother Livia and later his great-uncle, the Emperor Tiberius, on the island of Capri. Caligula was certainly well aware that the emperor was responsible for the deaths of his mother and siblings, but had no choice but to quell his emotions in order to survive. It was whilst living with Tiberius, surrounded by his imperial court and its subterfuge of power, policy, and deceit, that Caligula was exposed to the political intrigue and strategy that consolidated the Roman Empire. From exile to emperor. Caligula's ascension to emperor at the age of just 24 was largely achieved through his gaining of support from the Praetorian Guard, the Senate, and the Roman public. This was not particularly difficult, as Caligula's heritage was impressive. He was, after all, the great-grandson of the first Emperor Augustus, son of the esteemed general Germanicus, and great-nephew to Tiberius. The public had become disillusioned with Tiberius's repressive reign and yearned for change. Following his death in 37 AD, his adopted grandson, Tiberius Gemellus, Caligula's uncle, was initially set to succeed him. Yet both Caligula's great-grandmother Livia and the powerful Praetorian Guard instead supported Caligula's claim to the throne. Some historians contend that the cunning Livia saw in Caligula a means to maintain control over the empire, through a pliable and easily manipulated puppet capable of enhancing the significant influence that she already wielded behind the scenes. Prefect of the Praetorian Guard, Quintus Naevus Cordus Sutorius Macro, shrewdly looked upon his support for Caligula's claim as an opportunity for rapid promotion, affluence, and prosperity, and was even supposedly promised the governorship of Egypt in exchange for his sponsorship of Little Boots. Caligula was popular amongst the army, who had once revered his father and plainly hoped that his son would follow suit, and paired with his promise of a return to a time much like his great-grandfather Augustus's reign, with a restoration of many freedoms that were repressed during Tiberius's reign, the public rushed to support his claim. The Senate endorsed his claim in March of 37 AD, albeit highly intimidated by the Praetorian Guard, and once he assumed the throne, Caligula moved swiftly to consolidate his power. He eliminated any potential rivals and threats to his rule, including executing Tiberius Gemellus, and exiled or executed members of the nobility which he suspected of plotting against him. Rumors quickly abounded as to the role, if any, that Caligula played in Tiberius's death. Some claimed he had the emperor poisoned, much like it was suspected his own father died, whilst others suggested he took a more personal approach by sadistically smothering the emperor in his bed. However, the consensus amongst historians conclude it unlikely that Caligula played any part in the emperor's death. It was good in the beginning. In the early years of his reign, Caligula enacted a number of policies that brought him great favour from the general public. In the political sphere, he granted amnesty to many who had been exiled during Tiberius's reign, allowing them to return to Rome and resume their political activities. He improved relations with the Senate by consulting them on matters of governance and granting them greater autonomy in decision-making. In aid of the public, he implemented reformative tax cuts and abolished previously unpopular taxes, stimulating economic activity, and he garnered the support of the people by adopting policies of religious tolerance. Pay was increased for the military, and Rome's soldiers were provided with bonuses, land grants, and many other additional benefits upon completion of their loyal service. Evidently, people anticipated great things from Caligula. So, where did it go downhill? Mad, bad, and dangerous to know. The turning point in Caligula's reign is often attributed to a serious illness that nearly killed him. He experienced status epilepticus in 37 AD, which triggered an epileptic psychosis and the consequent psychopathic and paranoid changes. This may have been affected by excessive alcohol intake and lead poisoning. It was after his recovery that the first signs of his madness began. Some historians and psychologists have also attempted to label Caligula as suffering either singularly or collectively schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, encephalitis, neurosyphilis, and sociopathy, amongst a host of others. But there are many aspects to this discussion that unfortunately cannot be clearly satisfied without enough evidence to diagnose him confidently. The trauma that Caligula suffered throughout his youth and into adulthood cannot be underestimated. It's possible that he suffered from a genetic mental illness, or even that a genetic mental illness was exacerbated by his physical ailment. He often displayed examples of erratic behavior, excessive cruelty, paranoia, and grandiosity, appearing to have been unpredictable and impulsive, displaying extreme mood swings, and taking part in questionable and merciless behavior. As his reign played out, his behavior gradually became more bizarre and more tyrannical. His extravagant spending was troublesome and resulted in bankrupting the imperial treasury, and clear signs of megalomania surfaced, including a need to be worshipped as a god, and random acts of brutal torture and sadistic executions meted out at will. Caligula meticulously orchestrated a host of close personal deaths, either killing or cruelly driving to suicide his adopted son Gemellus, his father-in-law, and the Praetorian prefect Macro, who had assisted his rise to power. There was also evidence of incestuous relationships with his own sisters Livilla and Drusilla, with whom he had a relationship of intense passion, and other perversities such as mass debauchery during lavish banquets, sadistic sexual tendencies, and openly flaunted promiscuity. Tranquillius, perhaps not jokingly, refers to Caligula's palace as a brothel. Britannia. One of the more notorious events from Caligula's short reign that perhaps sums up perfectly the madness and unpredictability of his rule is the aborted invasion of Britannia. After travelling through Gaul and Germania, Caligula headed for the British Isles. According to ancient sources, Caligula organised his force of 2 whole legions on the Channel, facing towards the southern coast of Britain aboard triremes, but then inexplicably turned back after travelling just a short distance. Naturally, there was much confusion among his soldiers, who, after he returned to shore and ordered the trumpeter to sound the battle charge, were then ordered to gather seashells from the floor in their helmets and the folds of their clothes. The invasion force then returned to Rome to display the seashells for the Roman people. This bizarre order of events is contested amongst historians, with some outright denying their occurrence, and others seeking logical explanations such as a mock exercise or last-minute mutiny amongst his legions. Whatever the explanation, it was certainly in keeping with his previous peculiar manner. Assassination. Caligula's behaviour furthered the divide between himself and the Senate, and a conspiracy amongst the Praetorian Guard began to fester, culminating in his eventual assassination on the 21st of January 41 AD. The Praetorian Guard and the Senate, becoming increasingly fearful over his tyranny, unpredictable and mocking behaviour, as well as generally resenting his character, attacked him during a public event at the Palatine Games, one of his favourite pastimes. Tribunes Cassius Carrier and Cornelius Sabinus set upon Caligula, stabbing and hacking with their swords, as other centurions joined in until their emperor lay bloodied and dead. Caligula's reign is often considered to be one of brutality and madness. Yet, in more recent years, it has been suggested by historians that much of his lore may have been exaggerated over the years and stylized by Hollywood. It is also interesting to consider in today's more liberally minded society the role that mental illness and childhood trauma may have played in Caligula's adult life and subsequently his behaviour. It certainly cannot be underestimated. Ultimately, there are a number of aspects to Caligula's legacy that serve as cautionary tales of the dangers of unchecked power and both the prevalence and potential dangers of certain mental illness in people in power. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Roman Empire. Please do subscribe if you enjoyed the video, as we do release a new one every Friday, and any engagement is really going to help us out. Cheers everyone, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, hope you all have an amazing week. Cheers!